So usually I set up the movie, but considering I was 10 minutes late to the cinema because we'd agreed to meet on the train at 10 to get to the cinema for about 11:30, which is when it was starting, and I woke up at 11:10 and missed the first 10 minutes of the movie, would you say?
I'd say even less, actually. I'd say about 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I couldn't have missed much, but you go ahead, sir. How's the film start? Set us up.
The film starts with a mountaineer who has fallen off a mountain in suspicious circumstances, and we're introduced to the detective who's sent to investigate the mishap.
So that's what the film's technically about. I walked in on a scene that kind of represents, I think, what the film was really about, which is I walked in, sat in the cinema. I first poked Phil and was like, "Is that actually you?" So then we're sitting next to some random geezer. It's the detective, the lead of the film, having sex with his wife, and it's kind of it's dutiful sex. It's loveless sex, not from her side. She seems passionate about him, but from his side, it's just an act. He's just kind of going through the motions, getting it done. And she says to him, I think we should have sex once a week because there's all these reasons, and it's good for all these health benefits. Apparently it's good for your mind and it's good for your heart rate and all these things. And he's kind of like, oh, okay. And you can tell there's a lack of love on his side, and she's trying to find ways of convincing him of other reasons of why they should fuck. Which is kind of sad because, she's a dutiful wife that loves him, just wanting her husband to fuck her. And seemingly getting it, I guess, but not really getting it. He's doing the motions, but he's not really there.
Yeah, I agree.
And then it gets into the actual case, and he meets the Chinese-born refugee, essentially, who's come to Korea, married not a wealthy husband, but, a husband that's kind of, I guess, done well. He's socially seems to be a bit of a loser, doesn't have any friends, and he kind of scoops her up from the gutter. She describes at one point her way of getting across to illegally over to Korea. She was in a fish container with people, having to shit basically where she was squatting for 10 days. A complete mess when he found her. Vulnerable, really, as well. And he picked her up and dusted her off. Probably an element of mercenarial, as much as she was marrying him for the sake of staying in the country and, didn't have any other better options. You'd imagine he probably sensed her vulnerability and the fact that he could just get this young, beautiful woman that he couldn't get otherwise. Kind of sad, but also she doesn't talk about it. When she describes that moment, she doesn't describe it as if he was being predatory, or she doesn't describe it in a bad way. You'd get the sense there probably was some love there. You might feel love towards a person who's saving you in that moment, and then years down the line look at it differently. Do you know what I mean?
So the way she describes it, the husband's, I wouldn't call him a high up ranking officer in immigration, because it turns out later they just say that all he does is stamp passports. But what she does say is that I don't think it was mercenary, because the way she describes it later as, I was in this terrible state and he was just kind to me. That's all I wanted in that situation. So I guess she, as you said, she just feels like a piece of shit. She legit has people shitting on her. So yeah. And she just goes for the first person that shows her a spark of empathy, and just falls into that situation. And that's what it is.
Because this is one of those twisted love stories. It's Park Chan Wook, so he's always going to do a twisted love story. It's never straight. And I love those sort of movies. I love a love story like this where it's a little bit twisted, or in this case, a lot twisted. You're kind of trying to figure out the whole time. Is she a proper femme fatale? Is she just an evil bitch? Is she just manipulative? It's essentially a love story between a detective and the prime suspect in a murder case. And you're always trying to figure out, is it genuine? When is it genuine? What's going on? What are the motivations? But I more felt like the love was genuine the whole time. It wasn't so much like a twisty, turny, what's going on movie. I felt more like it was just a focus on two people falling in love under crazy circumstances.
She was definitely manipulative. I will say that.
To an extent.
Not to him personally, but to the other people involved in the film. She definitely did use her various characters. I counted, they called her beautiful 4 times. So I guess, and don't get me wrong, she is gorgeous, this actress. Yeah. But she's not actually as nice as the detective's wife.
On paper, there's something about it that's fucking sexy. Though.
But I guess what it is, Declan, is the detective is bored in that relationship, as you brought up early on. And I guess for him, there's an element of danger about falling in love with this woman, because he knows he shouldn't be doing it as a detective. Everyone knows that you're not supposed to like get into relationships with suspects. So I guess that is one of the main attractions of it. It's something very thrilling for him.
When they first meet, and there's a period when he's first investigating her because her husband's died under mysterious circumstances, and he's looking into it, and I really like the scenes where it was showing him putting her under surveillance, and he'd be watching her through binoculars. But then stylistically, Park Chan Wook would change the setup, and it would nearly become like a stage play where she was in her home, but he was also sitting there with her, and it was nearly like he was observing her from within the house. And to show that she had become aware of him, she would look at him in the room, but really she was looking up in his direction of where he was, in his cop car, trying to on the sly surveiller. And it was really beautiful, where you could really get a sense of him becoming more and more infatuated with her before he'd even had a conversation with her. And then she comes into the police station to answer their questions, and there's very subtle camera work showing the fact that she no longer has her ring on, but there's still the tan line around her finger. And there's points where she hides it under one of her hands as they're starting to get to know each other, and the chemistry's starting to build. And she's noticing his wedding ring, and you can see her manipulative brain is starting to think about, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to use this to my advantage? But at the same time, I think you can tell straight away there is a genuine chemistry going on.
Yeah, this is, in the lead up to the police station, this is one of my favourite scenes in the film, actually, because there's a song that comes up numerous times. This lady is a caregiver to the elderly, and she has introduced this song to a elderly person who seemingly has dementia, so she keeps repeating the song again and again.
정훈이 안 돼. 노래 좋지?
And Park Chan Wook's filmmaking, we all know it's very stylistic, very cool. But I like this scene because he's tailing her, the detective. They're going right, and each time they go right and click the indicator down, the beat of the song changes as well. And sometimes I don't like that style of filmmaking done in the wrong way, because it feels very sickly and very fake. And sometimes it's like, it's a good idea, but the way you're implementing it doesn't work, and you're just doing it for the sake of looking cool. And I never once thought of this in that film, and it's very well done. Like, as you mentioned before about the kind of theatre-esque way they're in the same room moving around. Like, if this was in another filmmaker's hands, it would easily not work. And that's testament to Park Chan Wook, how skilled of a filmmaker he is, how much he's honed his craft.
Yeah, and those sort of stylistic choices is Park Chan Wook in a nutshell. But also, it's his most restrained version of that. He doesn't go completely mental. Like, at times you're literally inside a phone looking out at the screen as he touches something. But it's never over the top, and it's somehow, in another filmmaker's hands, it would be corny. But it works perfectly in this, and he understates his usual style. It suits the movie because this isn't a completely batshit crazy movie like Old Boy. It's not really dark and overly twisted like Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. It's a lot more reserved than his usual films, and his style is more reserved to reflect that.
As a just all-round like film fan, the cinematography in this was lovely. Like, you know, a lot of it's set in the inner city, but the shots used, you know, like some of the aerial shots and some of like, it's very concrete junglish with all the buildings and the drab buildings, but the way it was shot, just I was thinking like, oh, Korea looks like a really like great place, you know.
Also, like,
you know
subtly, the cinematography would shift gears at times. There'd be scenes or sequences where there wouldn't be like your conventional cinematography, you know, dolly shots and this sort of thing. It would be sort of these subtle, but sometimes really unsubtle zooms in of a camera and zooms out. And it felt very much like they were trying to mimic the surveillance technology he was using and the sort of cameras he was using and the way they'd zoom quickly in and out when he was actually surveilling her. And it suddenly became like that was the directing the cinematography as well. And there was all these little subtle hints where you never... Like, I nearly wish I'd seen this movie a couple of times and read a bunch of stuff before I did this podcast, because I'm still playing through my mind certain things, decisions. Why decision to leave? Why did he do that? What is he hinting towards? Like, what is this film actually focusing on? I'm also glad we went into this just fresh after seeing it. But it's really interesting because... Sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just touching on the... We've touched on the actual cinematography. There was actually some great stuff done in post-production as well. I picked up specifically one scene at the end, but I think there was 3 transitions which really struck me. You know, at the end scene, there was one transition where it went from a beach, swept across straight into something else, and you know, I'm glad we done this fresh as well, because that's just I can remember it so vividly in my head.
Beautiful.
It just like all in all, the package was. I mean, I guess if you look at the package as a whole with fresh eyes, we saw this 2 hours ago, so we have fresher eyes than most. You can see why it was nominated for the Palme d'Or at Cannes. Like as an overall package, it is very beautiful.
Oh, it's fantastic. Because as you see, he starts to fall in love with her over the first murder investigation into her husband. And ultimately, he starts to become sure it wasn't her. And the evidence lines up to back that. You know, she has a perfect alibi. She was working that day. She was with a patient that she always sees on Mondays. The patient remembers her being there, even though she has dementia, not the most reliable eyewitness. There's CCTV footage of her coming and going. And her phone tracking shows that she was never left that spot that day. She was always in that home looking after that woman. The moment any evidence suggests that she has an alibi, he's kind of like with his partner on the case. Well, that settles that she has an alibi. Start looking into this guy's other girlfriends. He has a younger partner who's on the case with him. And he's kind of mental, you know, he's getting drunk a lot and he's can't keep up and he's like too eager to use his gun. He's just a bit silly, but he likes to interrogate the witnesses and beat the crap out of them. But he's right, like he is calling it. He's like, you're too, like, do you like this girl? What's going on here? Like, you're too easily convinced, like you're too ready to jump at the first bit of suggestion that she has an alibi or this, that. But he's like, nah, it's fine, you know, she has an alibi. And then they really start spending some time together. He lived in this town that was surrounded by fog. He has insomnia. It's suggested when they go to see a doctor with his wife that this insomnia is partly being created by the fact that he's living in this town up in the mountains. It felt like there was a lot of symbology around the fact that, you know, he was staying in Busan and, you know, his wife, the little town he was staying in with his wife, was technically causing his insomnia and therefore causing his depression, causing his midlife crisis that was leading him into wanting to stay in the city, where he was meeting with this new woman that had kind of she'd breathed fresh life into him with the new kindling romance. Now, she sort of organically convinces him to delete all the recordings of whenever he recorded his interviews with her. She also kind of organically convinces him to get rid of all the evidence and all the photos and stuff of the old husband and wife and whatever to do with her case. But it didn't feel like straight up manipulation, even as the audience, where you're going to be more suspecting of her than he is. So one morning, they're having their affair, they're having their love affair, and then one morning he gets text from her that's basically saying, I can't go to the Monday granny because Tuesday granny, because she sees different women every day of the week to care for him. Tuesday granny is on her way out. She's basically kicking the bucket, so she's asked for me, so I'm going in to stay with her. And he says, I'll go check in on her in the morning, and then an emergency girl will come in to relieve him, just as a favour. So he goes in, and he's hanging out with the granny. He's already interviewed her before and bluff, and he's happy with everything. And then she's trying to play that song you were talking about earlier. Yeah. Because she always likes playing it. And she can't get her phone working. So he says, let me have a look at it. And he's like, oh, it's the same one as Sin Yu, or whatever her name is. As the caregiver and his new girlfriend. And she's like, yeah, we bought it at the same time. And then he realizes, on the day of the murder, this granny's phone says that she climbed 138 staircases that day. I.e. a fucking mountain, which this granny obviously didn't do. So he immediately puts it together. Oh shit, she bought both phones at the same time, switched them out so that it would never show any tracking information. Obviously knew where the CCTV was, so snuck out the back window and then went back in so that she could leave and get caught on CCTV, leaving in the morning and coming in the daytime, in the nighttime. So he puts it all together, confronts her about it, and basically says to her, hide this phone away, throw it in the bottom of the sea, helps her cover for it, basically helps her cover her tracks, doesn't want her to go away, but also feels like a fool, the fact that he believed that she loved him. Yeah. Now, what did you think was going on with the characters in that scene? Like, what did you believe?
I'm not sure she did love him this whole time.
Really?
I'd have to rewatch it. I just think you said the word organically, convinced him organically to delete those. I don't think it was organic at all. I think she manipulated him to delete those. That's what I think personally. Do I think that she really loved him this whole time? I'm going to say no. I think that was all bullshit what she was saying. But then again, the ending later on, which we'll discuss, I'm then having second thoughts about it. So I don't know.
I think it was 100% both. Okay. She recognised early on that he fancied her. Yeah. She played on that to try and secure her perceived innocence so that her husband's death would be ruled a suicide, and fell in love with him in the process. For real.
So the scene that you were talking about, which occurs later on, by this point, she does love him.
Well, forget the scene later on. This moment, it's happened at the same time. She was doing both. She was being both manipulative and really fell in love with him. And realising at this moment, he loves her, but he's never going to want to see her again. So then the film skips on 13 months. The detective has moved permanently to the boring Ipco town. He doesn't want to see her anymore. He's committed to his wife. He's trying to make it work. There's a whole thing going on with his fertility. Again, I think a lot of what this movie is about losing your spark of love and finding yourself adrift midlife, classic midlife crisis, but also, you want to fall in love again. You want someone to spark that flame inside you. You want it to get something to get you going again. Like they say, there's been studies where even talking to just an attractive woman for a few minutes can raise a man's testosterone by 30% in the short term. Yeah. And, it's kind of a fucked up thing where having a committed, long-living relationship, and I've been in my relationship 4 years, there is something wonderful about growing with a person and becoming, just being committed to them and your lives intertwining. But completely losing that spark of love that you have first on can be horrible. And if you're going to be in a relationship, if you're stuck in a relationship with someone where you have a house together, you're legally tied to each other, you know, they didn't have children, but if you do have children, you must feel so trapped, especially when, you know, it's not a case of the love goes and you're just neutral. When you're stuck with a person that you don't love, or you've ever been sleeping with someone and you don't like them anymore, but you sleeping with them overlaps before you really realise that, and you end up having sex with them just that kind of out of duty, it's fucking feels horrible. It feels repulsive. So you get angry at someone, and then someone coming to love that can reignite that spark is fucking intoxicating, and it must be hard to turn down. But he's tried to turn it down, you know, he's eating pomegranates and doing all that bullshit and following the doctor's orders, getting 30 minutes of sunshine in the morning, trying to get his testosterone going, as if that's going to re-spark his love for his wife and try and get her pregnant. She has remarried, married a new guy who appears to be a money advisor / pyramid scheme swindler who swindled a bunch of people's cash, and she's getting slapped about by one of the guys who's lost money because of his stupid investments in a hotel room. And it's a massive jump. Like, they don't give you any context, which is Park Chan Wook's directing style. One of the things I love about the way he makes the movie is he just throws you into scenes where you're sort of catching up and trying to figure out what's going on. And that's part of the beauty of it. But what did you think of this big time jump and how much things had changed?
And by the way, before I do comment on the time jump, best character name in recent film history, the one that's slapping at everyone about, is called Slappy.
Yeah.
They're like, go before Slappy finds you.
And he slaps women about, but he also slaps men about. And he says, like, you know, your hand can break if you punch someone wrong, but I can slap people all day. He's a great character. He's a piece of shit, but he's a funny character. And you kind of sympathise with him because her new husband's clearly a chunk of shit. He's taken all his Slappy's grandma's investments, taking all her life's earnings, and he feels it actually worsened her condition once she realised all her money was gone. And she's going to die soon. When he's slapping her about, we see her in the hotel room getting slapped about by Slappy. He's saying, if my grandma dies, then I'm going to kill your husband. So then we skip on a bit, and they need to leave because they're trying to go to a town where they feel they'll never be seen because he's running away from so many people he's fucked over for money. So they go to the town of Ipco, and as a couple, they run into the detective and his wife in a fish market.
Yeah.
And how great is this scene where it's two people meeting, obviously two of them know each other. Detective's wife and the girl's new husband don't know each other and don't know these two know each other. But she hints at, like, oh, this is the detective who suspected me. So I guess they do know they know each other, but there's subtle moments where it shows their hands or their feet and just these little subtle things of, it really does such a good way with the camera work of expressing that subtle jealousy partners can have and mate guarding that's going on, where just little looks and the husband noticing the weird look between the detective and his wife, and just these little things where you pick up on it and you can see like hands clenching as they're getting a bit annoyed and thinking what's going on here. Really well portrayed.
That scene was pretty funny because it was like so awkward, and I found myself laughing in the cinema but I think on reflection, the detective's actual wife was a bit of a bitch.
Why?
Because if you think about it, he's controlled and stifled in this relationship, and I think that's one of the reasons he's so thrilled by this whole... Number one, obviously she doesn't know that he's in this whole thrill of courting this other, or trying to get this other girl to like... Whatever. He bursts through the door and he's still got all the adrenaline from it and says, oh, really want a cigarette. So she's like, no, you've quit, how dare you, we need to find this route, and fucks off on the phone like straight away. You've got that's nothing, but this whole fertility thing, She's so desperate. He can't sleep. She's so desperate for him to, on top of that, have a baby. Imagine how difficult this must be when you can't sleep properly. To be forced to fuck, forced to be trying have a baby when you get like probably no sleep at all a day. He's got visible bags under his eyes, been taken to all these clinics, wear this fucking retarded mask, you know, all this, like, this poor guy, like, no wonder he's going after.
You say that, but all I was saying was a dutiful wife that loves her husband that just wants to be fucked and have a baby. That doesn't seem like a lot to ask. What is she really asking him to do? She doesn't want him to smoke.
It does if his sperm doesn't work.
Yeah, but she doesn't hate him for that.
Yeah, true.
She wants his sperm to work. She wants him to love him. She cries at one point because she's like, "Why? I love it here with you." And I can tell you... She doesn't say it exactly verbatim, but she says, basically, I can tell you don't love it here with me. Just be honest with me. He doesn't tell her I don't love her. He's telling everything she wants to hear. Why is she a bitch?
Yeah, and I think he is actually...
Maybe I read it wrong. I didn't take it as controlling.
He's...
I took it as him being trapped, feeling trapped.
He's trapped. I think he's more obsessed with his job rather than anything else, because at one point when they're making the pomegranates, the whole symbolism of the pomegranates is it's supposed to be good for sperm or fertility, and they're sitting there crushing it up, peeling one after the other, and this is where the point of the snapping keep calling them snapping turtles, the turtles which they clearly eat in Korea for fertility as well. We'll get into that a bit later. But she says, you need violence and terror to get any kind of enjoyment, and it does make sense. She's just trying to like lead a normal life. She wants that stability, that baby, and he's like so obsessed with his job and hunting down murderers that this all seems, I guess, to him boring.
Yeah.
At no detriment of the poor, to the detriment of the poor wife.
So he's kind of like, why the fuck has she moved to this new town? What's going on? Like, to my town? That's a bit weird. In the conversation between the two couples in the fish market, where no one's obviously going to be saying what they actually mean, she says, I came for the mist, which I thought was interesting because it's nearly like a suggestion, like I came for the cover. It is actually true in a symbolic way, like they came to be anonymous. Yeah. So I came for the fog is nearly like a accurate thing to say.
I just realised the song that plays in it constantly is also called The Mist.
He's also bored. Another signification of the fact that, you know, he wants to be in the city where it's still alive and he doesn't want to be bored in this little suburban life yet, is the fact that he's now a detective in this town, living there full time, never going back to Busan, and he's bored. And especially that's kind of punctuated by the fact that his new partner, this nice little bulkhead sort of chick who I think might have been a lesbian, who I preferred to his first partner, actually. She was really funny.
I like her.
But she was so excited that I can't believe it's our first ever murder case in this town. So seemingly there's never been a murder, or at least not in modern times, in this little town. So you can imagine how bored he's going to be. And he shows up to the home. It's this beautiful home overlooking the sea. It's a beautiful swimming pool, which has been completely drained. And sitting there is a dead man. And when he goes to inspect it, it is her husband, the investor who had run off. And he walks down to the cliff that's on the property that's overlooking the sea, and it's her. Yes. And the first thing he says is like, he's just like, he basically says like, you did this on purpose. Do you think I'm a fucking idiot? What, you moved to the town where I am to try and get away with murdering another husband? Mm-hmm. But she seems really sad and contrite, and it's all a bit odd. So you're thinking, what is going on here? You assume the same thing as the detective. She's come to another town to kill another husband, to see him again, to try and get away with it again because she thinks he's that much of a fool. And he's taking none of it this time. We even see the fact that when he takes her in to question her this time, they made a real point of the first time he questioned her, the fact that he'd gone out and had ordered the most expensive sushi. Whereas this time she gets like this weird
corn dog,
deep fat fried corn dog thing, whatever it is. So it's making a real point that he doesn't believe her, he wants her. And it's reversed. The first time his partner in the first case was trying to convince him, like, nah man, why are you so obsessed? Like, I think she did it, we're gonna get her. This time his partner, the little chick is with the bowl haircut, is saying like, why are you so obsessed with getting her? Like, I feel sorry for this woman, she's had 2 husbands die. One's been murdered, one's been committed suicide. Did you feel like, what do you think his motivations were? Did you think he was like, no, I'm gonna get her? Because he clearly he covered for her, helped her cover her tracks the first murder. So clearly it wasn't just the fact that she's a murderer. Do you think it was the fact that he was hurt? Like, it's one thing, like, love can turn to hate in a second. Indifference means you don't give a fuck about someone. You don't go from love to indifference in a second. You go from love to pure, unadulterated anger in a second. So do you think he hated her because he loved her and she made a fool of him?
Yeah, I think his motivation was simply to sum it up. Like, you're mugging me off now. I've had enough of it. That's it. Like, he's just sick and tired. Bearing in mind he's got a lot of shit going on in his life. I know I keep mentioning not being able to sleep, the whole I'm too much of a weak man to have a baby, I guess. And then this woman's come along who he loves and then just rubbed salt into all his wounds and mugged him off again. That's his motivation. It's like, fuck it, I've had enough.
But the plot thickens more when he comes home and his wife says, her husband, the night he was murdered, tried to call me twice. And she starts assuming, I guess, that they're having an affair because she senses the chemistry between them. But also asking, did you two murder him together?
Yeah.
And it's not, at one point he comes back a few days later or a few nights later and she's leaving. She wants a divorce and she's walking out on him. And he doesn't exactly try and stop her. But you're thinking like, where is this going? Like, what's going on here? And there's this other thing where we see that he's investigating 2 people that saw her on a beach throwing something into the sea. So he quickly realizes it was her husband's phone. So he's thinking like, what? Oh, okay, so he's thinking like, what? She wanted to hide something on the phone. She thinks I'm going to get her off the hook again. And she does get off the hook. Like, no one suspects her. They realize that it was Slappy. He comes in. He just confesses to the whole thing. Admits he did it. It's case closed. And his partner's saying, like, let's celebrate. We've solved the first murder case in the history of this shitty town. And he's like, it's not solved. It was her. I know somehow it was her. Even though this other guy's admitted to it all. So he keeps pushing and pushing. They end up going up to this snowy mountain because he wants to confront her. And she says, I'm afraid of heights, and asks him to scatter her ashes, the ashes of her grandparents. And he does it, and he hears her walking towards him as he's overlooking this cliff. And interestingly, you see on his face, he thinks she's going to push him off.
Yes. Yeah.
And he allows it to happen. He closes his eyes and just braces for it. And it's like he's ready. He's ready to die. He doesn't care. He nearly, like, he'd rather know she's gonna kill him. Like, he doesn't. He just gives into it. But instead, she comes and hugs him from behind.
Yeah.
And he's fighting the fact that she loves him. He's obsessed with her. He no longer believes that she's in love with him, but the chance that she did really love him is worth dying. Like, he nearly, in that moment, it's worth the risk of finding out whether she really loves him or not to even die. And it's just such a brilliant mindfuck. Like, it's nearly more of a mindfuck than a time travel thriller where you're not sure what's going on, but just about people's emotions. And it's such a true depiction of how twisted and how topsy-turvy and non-linear love can be. Like it's not even, like, maybe calling it love isn't right, it's infatuation. Is it true love that's going on here? But it's just such a fascinating insight into it.
But I guess what makes this film so good and intriguing is love can be experienced in real life. Whereas if you're watching a trippy time travel film, you're like, that was great. Not going to happen though, is it? You know what I mean? Like, everyone in their own way has had that, you know, that classic getting the flower and breaking off petal by petal. She loves me, not kind of thing. So I guess that's why this film will resonate with a lot of people, because, not to be soppy or anything, but love is one of the most powerful things I guess you can experience in this life.
Oh, it's intoxicating. Yeah. But there's you know, unrequited love is horrible, but overlapping unrequited love, interchanging unrequited love, like, I guess you would call it unrequited love, but like in this, where they're in love at different times, and who's kind of has the balance, or who has the power in one sense, who's pursuing who, changes at different times in here. And it's very frustrating because, you know, I'm a fucking cornball when it comes to love in movies. Like, I want it to end with them always getting together and everything working out great. And in this film, you know, at this point, even if she did do it, even if she is a murderer and, you know, she's the bad guy, I still want them to get together, because I'm just digging the chemistry between the two actors so well. But it gets towards the end where he's basically realized there's a tracker on her phone, so he's trying to track her location. And he's asking her, like, what was on the phone? Why did you throw your husband's phone into the ocean? Like, what were you hiding? He still believes, no, you murdered him. And by tracking her down and realizing and speaking to Slappy, he realizes that she went and brought these 2 suicide pills that he knew she had, because he realizes they were missing from the urn. Forgot about that bit. But basically, he realizes that she went to visit Slappy's mother or grandmother and slipped her the pills. Grandma died, and she did that because she knew the moment she died, Slappy would go and kill her husband. But why? And we find out she's still being confused about it and not clear. But basically, we realize that the husband found a recording from when the detective was basically telling her to cover her tracks. And the gist of it was, the conversation revealed that he was sleeping with a suspect in a murder case he was investigating, and then helped her cover her tracks for the murder. Yeah. So his life was going to be fucked. So this whole time, she was actually manipulating things. The first murder case to save herself. Yeah. The second murder case to save him. But he refused to believe it the whole time, because obviously, naturally, he'd been burnt by her once. And it's sad because you realise, she says, he's like on the phone to her when he's trying to get to her, and she's gone off to the beach for some reason, saying, what is the conversation? What conversation are you talking about? What is the recording? And she says, it was the moment you told me you loved me. And he said, when was that? And she's like, the moment you told me you loved me was the moment you stopped loving me. Yeah. And the moment I started loving you.
Yeah, and there's the whole reason she goes to the beach is because there's real symbolism between mountains and sea in this. There's that one passage where you know, it's easy to forget actually, because it's not like like Knives Out, where there's like twists and turns and Cluedo kind of thing, but it does require a lot of, you have to keep up with. There is a few twists and turns.
It's a maze of people's emotions.
Yeah.
You know, like we know, if you're any human being with complex emotions and feelings about stuff, you can feel a bunch of different things at one time, and that means your motivations are going to be all clusterfucked. So it's not a David Lynch confusing movie. It's a human condition complex confusing movie. You know, you're trying to constantly work out why people are making these decisions.
Yeah, I want to emphasise on that point, Declan. Don't be put off of seeing this film because you may think that it's too intricate and complicated, the plot. It's not, if you look at it in reflection.
Also, it's not depressing. It might sound depressing. Yeah. It might sound like some boring art house piece. It's entertaining as fuck. Yeah. And it's told in a really entertaining way. It's very funny in a lot of ways. It's dark comedy, but it's very funny. It's got that natural pop classic Park Chan Wook sort of humour to it, not in just the, you know, funny characters, but also funny style of direction and the way he tells the story. And it's the delivery and the visual style of the film is really, really, really understated for Park Chan Wook, but it's got his natural personality still running through it.
There was this passage earlier on when they first are interviewing each other, first meet in the interview room. Or she says, the mountains are essentially for benevolent people. The sea is for people who are grounded, and I water is for people who are grounded. I am not benevolent. I love the sea, which is kind of like cool. And there's a big keeps going back to water, keeps going back to the sea, especially. It keeps repeating the recording of the detective. Take this phone, throw it somewhere deep into the sea. Throw it somewhere deep into the sea where no one will find it. And that kind of nicely ties up the whole, would you call it a metaphor of this piece?
Because she doesn't just tell him to throw that phone back into the sea, which she threw into the sea. It's been fished up by divers and that's how he's got it. And she goes to the beach, digs a big hole, climbs into it and waits for the tide to come in to drown her. And as she's dug up the sand behind her, behind the hole, it's formed a mountain.
Yes.
And as the tide comes in and fills the hole, which we don't see, we just see it after, but we see the tide coming in and wipe slowly off with a couple of waves, wiping away the sandy mountain that she formed behind her to fill in the hole, revealing the sun with the beautiful cinematography. The mountain's been washed away. She's gone to the sea. She's not just told him to get rid of the evidence of them talking. She's literally thrown herself into the sea and got rid of herself. And the movie ends as he runs onto the beach out of time. The water's already washed over her hole. He never even really notices it because it's washed the mountain away. And we never even see her. We never even see the evidence that she was killed. We just have to assume it.
And it's kind of sad. Actually, it's not kind of sad. It is sad. He gets to the point where she was. And he's literally stepping on where she is. But it's just, as you said, not there anymore. And he's screaming repeatedly, get the search teams down here, don't ask questions, she's here, I know she's here, calling her name, Hung So, repeatedly. And I guess it's kind of like nicely ties up the metaphor of this film. Like, he's in love with her, he's chasing her, but it never ends up happily and they never end up together, and he forever will be chasing her now because she's gone.
Yeah, major bummer in the end.
And I kind of like that, Declan. I kind of know you said I'm like love it when they get together, but I like it, unfortunately, when they don't, because from what I know about life, not that I've had a hard life or anything, most of the time it doesn't work out. Life doesn't work out. It's not... we watch movies to see that whole, like, oh, they get together, like the whatever film, The Notebook, or how great, but it doesn't end like that 9 times out of 10, and that is why I like the way it ended like this, that sad thing, because if they did turn around on that beachy front with the beautiful shot of the sun and they ran towards each other like fucking Shawshank Redemption and it panned out and you see them running and hugging, I'd be like, after all of that, that's what you give me.
You'd have one moment of gratification and then it'd be done and you'd forget the film forever. And I'll remember this film I'll remember things about it, I remember the fact that how the technical elegance and, Park Chan Wook really feels like he's just in his absolute pomp of his style. He could make a movie about someone reading a phone book and it would be amazing. But the fact that, like, when you go years from seeing a film, you don't remember any details about it, but you remember how you felt about it. And that's nearly the best thing, where you're like, oh, I get to watch this nearly like it's fresh, but I know I'm going to like it because I just remember loving it. And the emotional feeling I'll leave this film was the fact that it showed you this love story, made me invested in it, made me consider this, that, and the other, and it leaves you without it. I'm still thinking about it. Like, I'll remember this film in a couple of days' time, and I'll be like, fuck, I wish they'd got together. Damn, man. You know, I wouldn't be thinking days later, oh, I'm glad they got together. That was a good ending. I'll be thinking about this forever. And, you know, the film is there. It's in its complete form. Their lives don't exist beyond the film ending. So that's all you will ever get of those two characters. They didn't get to ever truly be together.
Yeah.
And it sucks, but that's brilliant because it makes you feel like you feel so much more about it because of that ending.
I don't like to use awards as a yardstick for how good films are, because there's a lot of films that haven't won awards which deserve to win it over films that have. Obviously, as I said, this was nominated for the Palme d'Or at Cannes. I don't think it ended up winning. But looking forward into the future, and again, we'd have to see the other nominations to compare to it, but there it will be at the Oscars, you know, the mandatory foreign language film that always wins the Oscar. Do you think this will be in a good position to win that category?
I mean, not if I sat down and think, like, I have to look through like what else has been this year, but off the top of my head, like, do you know what? Even not seeing whatever's out, it has to be in contention. I can't imagine there's been that many better foreign films than this. It is fantastic. I cannot wait to watch it again. Even now, like, just talking about it, having this fresh conversation just after it has made me link so many things together that I didn't even realise at the time. I didn't even realise the symbolism of her making the mountain of sand behind her by accident until I started thinking about it and talking about it with you. So I can't wait to watch this film again. I can't wait to link up different things and get a better idea of what Park Chan Wook was trying to say of this. And also, like, if you're umming and ahhing about whether to see it or not, and you're thinking, oh, these two are going on a lot about symbolism and shit like that, which I don't really care about when I'm watching a movie, don't get me wrong, all that is secondary just to a great story, beautifully told, with beautiful acting and fantastic direction from Park Chan Wook. Like, it is an easy recommendation from me.
The biggest compliment I can pay to it is we know how good Park Chan Wook is from his other films, but it's just beautifully made in its construction. Got a recommendation. I recommend this if you're a film fan. I recommend this if you're not that big into film. Check this out because it's amazing in my opinion.
Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe.